This video is produced by Sailrite. In this video we'll be making a square frame awning. This square frame awning will utilize a sleeve at the head rod and then tie bars to draw it tight. Let's get started and show you how it's done. First thing we need to determine is the width of the desired awning. Obviously the width is determined by your particular application. To determine the appropriate projection, the drop, and the depth of your particular awning, it's best to take a couple yardsticks and take them against the building with a helper to determine exactly what will look best for your particular application. Obviously the mounting position and the drop of your particular awning can vary. Once those measurements are determined, it's a good idea to sketch this all down on paper and write down each one of those measurements. We're using galvanized pipe 3/4 inch, which actually has an outside diameter of 1 inch. We're also using 3/8 inch pipe for the tie downs, and then EMT 1/2 inch conduit for the head rod. Let's also get a close-up of the hardware here. This is the hardware labeled for our particular pipe size. We also sell different hardware for alternate pipe sizes, but this will tell you exactly what you need to get for your tie-down awning. Here you can see the head rod being held in place with the rod and rafter holder. Throughout this video we'll be referring to certain parts of the awning. This illustration will help you to identify what we're talking about. Here's a material list for all the hardware and tubing that you need to put the frame together. This doesn't include the fabric and the supplies to sew it together. This is for awnings under 60 inches in width. If your awning is over 60 inches in width, you may want to add extra rafters and struts. Those rafters and struts will add to the rigidity of your frame structure. Typically they're spaced from 46 inches apart to 60 inches apart. You'll then determine what size to cut each pipe. Remember that the hardware, such as eye-ends, will always make the pipe longer. We'll be using a reciprocating saw to cut the 3/4 inch galvanized pipe and also the EMT 1/2 inch pipe used for the head rod. You can also use a hacksaw, but as you see here in the video, a reciprocating saw works very well and is much faster. For filming purposes, we'll be installing our awning frame to a plywood board covered with naugahyde. Once all your pipe is cut to the appropriate length and the hardware installed, typically we install it directly to your application. We've installed it to a plywood board. Then we need to find a constant on the frame so that we can make our cover. We're going to use a Sharpie at this point and we'll measure from that point. The first measurement will be for the depth. So we'll take it all the way to the wall where we've assembled the awning, all the way to that constant point that we marked. This application is 27 inches for the depth. We'll then take a T-square going from the wall to our constant, and then we'll mark the position horizontally all the way at the wall with the Sharpie. Our awning's been mounted on plywood and we have naugahyde covering the plywood, so we just used a pencil. We'll now get a drop measurement from the head rod all the way to that mark we placed on the wall. We'll want to mark all these measurements down on paper. With that depth measurement that we took earlier and now the drop measurement, we can start to fabricate the side panels. Deb will now add a curtain to the bottom of this awning. We need that to cover up the tie bar. So she's going to add a curtain that drops down 6.5 inches. The amount of drop measurement for the curtain can obviously be modified to your application.
Okay, this is for our valance that's going to hang off around the front. Add that onto your side panel, and you'll make your cuts into that later for what you want for your valance to show. We also are going to need a 1-inch hem over here.
Deb calls the curtain a valance
to give the back a finished edge.
Deb's now going to add some hems and also seam allowance onto this drawing. Then we'll transfer that to the fabric.
Add 5/8 out here.
The 1 inch on the back edge is for a hem, and this 5/8 is for seams to join the side panel to the main panel. Obviously this is not to scale, this is just for reference.
For seaming.
Before we get any further, we're going to give you a material list of the items that you may need to purchase to make the awning cover. Obviously, the amount of materials will depend on the size of your awning. The size grommet can be substituted for other sizes if you have other die sets in possession. We'll now transfer those measurements to the fabric. Our fabric choice includes stripes. We're not going to be overly concerned about how the side panel stripes line up with the main panel stripes. If you are, you may want the front edge of the side panel to line up against a stripe, and then always take into consideration the factoring of seam allowance. We're not going to go over that.
There's a 1-inch line we need to allow for the hem for finishing it off. We want to make sure our piece isn't that far. Also, we want to measure up 6.5 inches, which we've already squared off our edge here. So we have 25 and an 8, and then we want another 6.5, so we have plenty for our valance hanging off this edge. So 25 and an 8, 6.5, 31 and 5/8, 31 and 5/8. And then we're going to come across 27, but we have to add our 1 inch that we've allowed already for our hem. So it's going to be the 27 plus the 1, 28 inches over to this point.
Deb's using a soapstone pencil. The beauty of this is it marks the fabric well and comes off later.
You want to go up to 6.5. Okay, and then we'll measure over one more time. Or 28. Okay, then you want to go from that cross point up to our point here where we measured for our 31 and 5/8. Straight line there. Straight line down from the 6.5. Okay. Now we have our 1 inch for our hem. We also need to add our 5/8 inch around the edge for our seaming. And also this way. Strike another line, and that'll be our cut line. So this outer edge here will be your cut line.
We'll now measure the projection, including the curtain, for the length of the main panel.
Okay, now this is the cut line. This is our sew line. You want to measure the inner sew line to get your center panel, the length of your center panel to come down the top. So you start at your point here, not including your 1 inch hem, down. Okay, we're at 37 at the corner. So 37 there. Come up at 43.5. So our center panel needs to be 43.5 inches long.
Oh, one more thing. Don't forget to mark your panel. This is the right panel. You don't want to get confused. Now let's sketch out that main panel on paper.
So 43.5. This way. Okay, the only thing is, up above this piece, we have to form a pocket at the top
That pocket or sleeve will be for the head rod.
for the tubing to go through at the top, and you want to add 2 1/4 inches for the pocket. So then our total would be 45 3/4. For the height from the front to back.
Now that we have that, we need to get a width measurement for that main panel. So go back to your frame structure and measure from one edge to the other edge.
Okay, so 49 out this way, back and forth, and then we're going to have seam allowance here also. So we need to add 5/8 for seam allowance on both sides, which is 1.5 inches. We take 49 plus 1.5 inches. We have 50.5, and that'll be our total width. So our top panel is going to be, we want to cut it at 45 3/4, going up and down by the width of 50.5. Okay, our fabric is 46-inch fabric. So in order to get our 50.5, we'll have to add an extra panel to the end, which we'll show you how to do that when we get
This
to that
umbrella marine grade / awning grade fabric really is best cut with a hot knife. We're using the professional Ingle hot knife here, but you can use a wood burning tool or a soldering gun to cut the edge. You can cut it with scissors as well, but do expect a little bit of unraveling. To have a finished edge, a hot knife is best.
Okay, this is the right panel. Now to get the left panel, you want to flip it face to face down the fabric. Line it up and just trace around.
If you're concerned about matching up stripes from the front panel to the side panel, you need to create the front panel first.
We're putting ours off to the side here is we want to be able to utilize this long strip here to widen our center panel. You may want to construct yours differently as far as the layout, but this works best for ours.
Now Deb's just going to trace around this, and she uses a yardstick or a long ruler to help hold the panel in place. She uses her soapstone pencil here to trace around the entire parameter.
Okay, and then you want to mark this one to your left. Well, you got both of them marked in case one gets ripped off or misplaced somehow. And then we're going to strike this line all the way across the fabric. That way we've got a straight edge. Start our center panel by right off the bottom of the side panel. Okay, and then our overall width, like we came up with before, is 43 3/4 or 45 3/4. I'm sorry, for the height of it. Strike a mark. Across, and that'll be the main body on the top. Then we'll come up here and we're going to cut this panel oversized, and then we can sew it to the main panel there, and we can get our width later.
As discussed earlier, if you're concerned about lining up the stripes of the main panel with the side panel, you would create this main panel first, cut it to size, and then determine where the stripes will lay for the left side panel. Then you'd create that panel.
Okay, and our panel 45 3/4 that we just drew here, this is going to be an extension, so we want to measure 45 3/4. 45 3/4. There. The main line coming up here. Okay, and then we'll cut those pieces apart, and then we'll show you how to do the center.
We didn't show it, but we used a hot knife to cut all those panels, and here they are, laid out. You've got the two side panels, and you have the two panels that'll make up the main panel. Now we'll join those together. We'll show you how.
We're going to seam stick this piece down onto that, And what I'm actually using is the salvage edge of the fabric, which is already finished off. But you could also use the hot knife edge. I just want to go ahead and flip this around from when we cut it out. And I'm just going to add on to this. You have to make it consecutive with the stripes. You measure out how wide your stripe is. And this one is at 6.5. So we want this to end up at 6.5.
When the stripes are correct, place a line along that salvaged edge to the fabric so that you can determine where that panel will be seamed to the opposite panel. Now we'll join a line matching up those marks so we can lay that opposite panel right next to that line. We're using double-sided tape, part number 129. This is the acrylic double-sided tape. It sticks really well to this umbrella. And we're pasting it in that seam area. We peel off the paper backing, revealing the glue, and then we'll baste the opposite panel to this one so that it doesn't move when we take it over to the sewing machine. Please excuse the plotter noise in the background. Jeff Frank, our sail designer, is now plotting and cutting sails. That's the vacuum table that you hear sucking the fabric down to the tabletop so it doesn't move. Here Deb is sewing on the big and tall sewing machine, and she's placing a straight stitch right along one of the edges of that fabric panel on this side. Then she flips the panel so that she can sew against the opposite edge on the underside. She keeps the stitch approximately 1/8 inch from the edge, and she sews with at least a 6mm straight stitch. We're using Tanara thread. Tanara thread will not rot in the sun, period. End of sentence, and it's very chemical resistant. You can use Dacron. We recommend a V92 Dacron or polyester thread as well, which is UV resistant, not UV proof. Dacron is DuPont's name for polyester. Again, I apologize for the background noise.
So now we're going to come down here. This is our panel we added. We want 50 1/4.
Remember, the width of the added panel is too large. We need to cut it down. That's what Deb's doing now. Jeff shutting off each one of the vacuum stations for the plotter table now, so soon enough we'll be rid of that noise in the background temporarily.
Over here and mark the width of it.
When Deb cuts this, she'll use that professional hot knife and she'll place it on top of a metal ruler to prevent damage to the tabletop.
Okay, and then you just cut the excess off and you got your top panel, the size that you need.
The next frame, Jeff's plotting again. Excuse the noise. This is Sailrite's 50-foot plotter bed, and you can see here Jeff's is plotting a spinnaker, just to show you what's going on.
Okay, now we're going to create the pocket up here for the rod that goes across the top. And the way we do that is I like to make an edge that I can fold my cut edge to make it finish. So we're going to strike a line for 4 inches. That allows plenty of room for the top pocket. Okay? So we're going to hit a line 4 inches down. Strike that line all the way across.
We'll then use the double-sided tape, part number 129, to seam it together prior to sewing. Now before you create the sleeve, you may want to just create little tucks at the end to make a finished end. Deb didn't do it here, but she's going to do it right now to show you how that's done. She kind of forgot that earlier.
1/4 of an inch. Bring it down where your 4-inch line's at. You want to kind of ferret back out to the raw edge because we're going to be sewing on this edge, but this pocket we want the end to be finished. So just do like 1/4 of an inch hem. Like I said, ferret back out to the bottom of the line. On both sides we want to do that.
You don't have to do this, but it definitely creates a finished edge for the sleeve.
Fold it over just enough so that it's a finished edge. You always want to back stitch a couple times. Same on this side.
Alright, once that's done, then use the double-sided tape and seam that sleeve down, and then take it to the sewing machine, as we're going to do right now, and sew right along that edge, about an 1/8 inch away from the raw edge, and back stitch at the beginning and the end.
Our pocket made up here with our finished ends, and we're going to go ahead and put our 1-inch hem that we allowed for on the back side of our panel. So we want to flip them over to the back again. And I do the same thing with this. I'm making a 1-inch hem. So if you make your line in 2 inches and fold over to it, and you have your 1 inch. We're going to do that on both panels and get those hems done up. You want to make sure that all your hems go to the inside, not at the top, because there'd be places for any kind of dirt stuff to catch, so you want them up underneath. So you want to make sure you do it on the back side. Okay.
The same procedure, double-sided tape, to create a nice hem.
There. I would just run right along the very edge of that.
Same as before, keep the stitch about an 1/8 inch away from the raw edge, reversing at the beginning and reversing at the end. Do that to both panels. We'll not show the other panel.
Okay, next we need to put on our end panels, okay? Now you want to start those at the bottom edge because if you have any differential, you want it to land up here where it's not quite as important. But you do want to make sure that you get it even. Okay, so you want to start your panel at the bottom, even. We're going to sew up here, and then this will turn just like that. When we do the other side, we're going to flip it upside down so that we're able to start at the bottom also. See this? You can't see it real well because of the stripes, but you want your hems to be facing up on the side panel and your pocket hem to be facing down. That way when you sew it up, all of your raw edges will be inside. So you want to make sure it's face to face is what we call it. The face of the fabric is face of the fabric. Then we'll put our magnet here so we get our 1/2 inch.
Deb's going to use the magnetic sewing guide. This is a phenomenal guide that does not move. It's got an extra strong magnet compared to those cheapies you buy elsewhere. This is great.
When you come up to the corner here, you want to make a small notch. Okay, you want to make a notch going right straight in from that corner on the bottom panel. But you want to make sure you only go in about 1/4 of an inch, because if you go in too far, your cut's going to show past your seam. So you only want to go up on this side of your seam, go up to that notch there, which will be your 1/2 inch at the corner, and just if you can bury your needle in the corner. Lift up your foot and just pull your panel sideways, and that notch allows it to turn and lay flat so that we can go on with our stitching. Continue our 1/2 inch seam all the way to the very top. Okay, now here at the top, you don't want to sew your pocket shut, so we want to stop sewing right at our pocket seam here. So with this extra here, we're just going to take that over, fold it over to that stitch line, and just continue with your stitches. Now you can take just that little triangle there and snip it off so it's not in your way or hanging out. Like I said, you want to fold it at your stitch line and just go right up to that stitch line and back stitch. And that creates a finished edge for the side curtain coming down, and then your pocket is open for the post coming through. Okay, now we're going to do the top stitching on this panel. Now you can go ahead and do it from the top. Sometimes it's easier to run it from the inside, and that's what we're going to do here. You're going to flip it upside down. You want to make sure that your seam's laying against your side panel, okay? Now I try to use my edge of my foot for a guide. You do want to move that out of your way. Okay, and then you just sit your foot down and then just let the edge of your foot follow that stitch. You want to roll this up and you want to kind of pull in and push out as you're going so that that seam is going to be nice and flat on the outside. Okay, so you want to also do a few back stitches.
Notice how Deb pulls the panels apart so that first stitch is the fold point. This is called a semi-flat felled seam. And onto the semi-flat felled seam, the stitch we're doing now is called a top stitch. It will be visible on the outside of the cover, whereas the first stitch is only visible on the underside of the cover. This is a very popular seam.
Okay, now we get up here to our corner where our notch is. You just let that fall forward, and you'll have like a little corner miter. So you want to go up to that miter, and then we'll turn the fabric. Bury your needle. Okay. You want to turn your fabric. Just kind of push that corner back. You can continue on your top stitching. Do a few back stitches at the end. Okay. Now we have this panel's top stitched around the outside, nice and flat, so that when it comes down, it'll lay nice and flat. Okay, now we're going to flip this so that we can start at the bottom, keeping that face to face again. And you can see our little 6.5 here. Okay, now once you get started on that, you come in with your scissors and flip the top piece because it's the facings on the bottom now. So when you get up there, you'll sew up to this turn. Pull the bottom piece across rather than the top. Okay. I like to hold it back about a foot or so just to make sure that they're not sliding it off. Okay, and again up here where the pocket is, you don't want to sew that shut. You want to just go up to that with take this corner, hold it down like before. We can flip that off. Okay, and you want to fold that down to your seam edge, keeping the point even on the outside. Okay, and we want to just stitch up to that and do some back stitches.
And as we did previously, we'll create the top stitch for the semi-flat felled seam here. Remember to pull both sides apart so that your first stitch is actually the fold. Here we are working from the opposite direction here, so we're coming up to the top portion of the curtain or valance. Brand new Sunbrella fabric is rather stiff, so you may have to work out this corner so that it lays flat so you can feed it through the sewing machine. Be patient with yourself. When you make adjustments, make sure your needle is buried, then pivot on the needle with the foot lifted, then lower the foot and then continue to sew again. That's a good idea to prevent needle deflection issues. Now we'll sew the rest of the way, and we'll do the same procedure that we did at the top where the sleeve is. We will not show that. Here it is finished with that top stitch. Moving on. Before you do anything else, it's always a good idea to insert the EMT half-inch pipe in this top sleeve and test for its fit. Obviously, we're not done yet, but we just want to make sure that everything is exactly like we want it. Loosen the thumb set screw of the rod and rafter holder, and then place that sleeve with that half-inch EMT inside underneath the finger, and then tighten it back down. Do that to the other side as well, and check your fit. Everything for our awning seems to be fitting perfectly. It obviously hasn't been tensioned yet because we haven't got those lacing strips installed. We're going to do that next.
Now what we're going to have to do is create a little stretch of fabric here that is like a pocket type. And we want to put the grommets in it because of lacing it, and that will tighten it down on the front, sides, and everything. All three sides.
When this step is complete, here's what the lacing strips with grommets will look like, and you can also see the leech line that's used to draw it tight. That's what Deb's explaining right now.
So you want to kind of take a straight edge and put that up behind the bar, and then right about where our 2 inches fall in here is right about where you're going to want the bottom of it to run.
It really doesn't matter where this tab that will be 2 inches wide with grommets placed in it is sewn down. The point is we want it to be at least an inch above the tie bar. That's that 3/8 inch pipe that we have for our application. If it's lower than an inch, then you won't really have enough power or lacing capability to draw the rest of the awning tight. So keep it approximately an inch above that tie bar. Deb's now going to explain where she's going to attach that 2-inch strip.
And you want to kind of hold your cover taut with your edge up on the top and find out from this point up how far it is, which this is running about in the center here, about 7 1/4 inches.
That places that sleeve approximately an inch up above that tie bar.
We want to mark up on the side panel 7 1/4 inches and strike a line across, and that's where we want our grommet strip to run. Okay, then we'll come around to the front here and pulling it taut across so that it's nice and tight through the top. We want to be behind that front bar also. And that looks like it's going to run about 6 1/2 inches.
Same thing. We want that grommet strip to be an inch above the tie bar.
We'll strike a line all the way across the front. So we have 6 1/2 inches on our front, and then we had 7 1/4 over here on the side. We still can use just the 2-inch strip because our grommet's going to run right about here that we can lace our line through that will tighten it down. So we'll go back now and we'll strike our line at 6 1/2 on the front and 7 1/4 on the sides. We'll make our 2-inch strips and sew them on.
Alright, we've taken the awning down and now we're going to mark those positions.
Alright, this one needs to be at 7 1/4. Okay, and then when we sew this on, we're going to stop here at the hem because we really don't need anything back here. And then we're going to come up to your top stitch up there front.
We'll now move to the front panel and do the same procedure. Lay it so it lays flat. This is pretty self-explanatory. We're just measuring the front panel and then we'll strike a line, and then we just want to do the same procedure for the opposite side panel with the same measurement that we used for the first side panel. Let's move on and let's talk about how to cut those strips for the grommets. Deb's marking some scrap fabric to 4 inches. That's how wide we want these strips. And she needs about 3 strips, so she's just making 3, and then she cuts them with the professional hot knife again. Once that's done, we'll fold them directly in half so they equal 2 inches. You need enough strips to cover the entire length of your front panel and your side panels.
We're going to put grommets in this 2-inch, and we want a double thickness for our grommets. And if you sew this together first, it's a little bit easier to get it on. That way you're not going to have it sliding in different directions, both layers.
We're just pre-stitching this, about 1/8 inch away from those raw edges. Then we'll sew it on to the cover.
Okay, and our stripes, we're matching them up so that there's no craziness going on like this when you look up underneath. And we only want to come over to the hem here, so we'll cut that off.
What Deb said here is debatable. You may want to take this grommeting strip all the way to the end and install a grommet right at the end. That can help pull it tight right at that end. But for our application, this is what we've done, and it really comes out fine that way too. But I think I would have had it run all the way to the end. That would just be my choice. There's no hard, fast rules in canvas. It's just what works.
Do some back stitches here.
She just matches up that strip with that line she drew on earlier and sews all the way to that semi-flat felled seam, or I should say the main panel. Now she'll cut it here. And she'll cut it right at that seam. That's perfect. That's exactly what I would do too. And now we'll continue on and sew on the main panel grommet strip, starting right there at that seam. And obviously it's at a different position than it was on the side panels because our tie bar is at a different height.
Matching up, we're just a little bit too long here. You don't want to get a whole bunch of bolts in your corner. Just want to go up to the stitch seam. Doesn't have to be right up on top of it, but you want to get as close as you can. Lay down your line.
Yes, I know. That voice in the background is Jeff. He's talking to a customer on the phone, probably about sales. We apologize for that, too. Unfortunately, we have to shoot all these videos while Sailrite is in full production, so there are a lot of background noises that I wish weren't in here, but they are because we have to try to make money.
Okay, we're just a little bit short, so kind of piece.
Deb's cutting the strip so that it only comes up against that semi-flat found seam for that side panel, and she's also going to cut it back here where the other strip ends. You could just run it directly on top, but might as well cut it off. Whatever. We'll not show adding that grommet strip to the last side panel. We'll stop there and we'll start showing you how to install the grommets. Deb places that first grommet about 1.5 inches on that front panel, and she places the opposite grommet on the other side of the front panel about 1.5 inches from the end. The placement really doesn't matter much. The lacing will pretty much lay wherever it lays, but we like to space them approximately every 6 inches apart. There are no hard fast rules for this, so whatever makes sense, and obviously the width of the awning will depend on your placement. You do not have to have them exactly 6 inches apart. You can make them different if you'd like. To install the grommets, we first need to punch a hole in the fabric. We're going to use number 1 spur grommets. You could use a number 2 if you already have a number 2 spur grommet die set, or you could use zeros as well. So number 1 is about perfect for lacing, and now we're placing that spur grommet on top of the die set, and then we use a heavy mallet to give it a few blows to set the grommet in place. Utilizing a spur grommet is nice because it's thicker metal than a common washer grommet, and it also has teeth that bite into the fabric and roll over so they stay in place. You'll notice here as well we're using the rubber cutting block to help prevent damage to that cutting tool. We highly recommend it. One more important fact: don't cut your hole through the awning top. Make sure the flap is laying by itself.
Okay, now we just finished putting in all of our grommets, so we're all ready for our lacing on that. And now we're going to put an edge, scalloped edge around the front and the sides of the awning. Now, if you want to, you can make your own template and make it any shape really that you want to. But just keep in mind that a long gradual curve is much easier to cover with the binding than to have it come up on a short curve here and then back down, or even an inside corner. Those are real hard to work with. If you want to attempt that, you know, that choice is yours, but I just wanted to let you know that long gradual curves are much easier to work with. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start at the very back edge of our project here, and we're just going to work the template all the way around to the other side, and then we will cut off our cutouts here. You want to keep it up to the edge, and you really want to square off the bottom of your template so that you can do that. Make sure that you're working with a real nice flat edge. That way you can start and stop. And I would advise that you make your template go from like the center of one of your curves and continue to do a complete one, and then you can stop in the center. Of course, you can make it longer if you want, but at least that way you know where your center falls, and you can just continue with the template going around.
You can make this template out of anything, even cardboard.
Okay, so now we're just going to draw this around.
Again, we're using that soapstone pencil.
Have to kind of flatten it down as you go because it will pull itself up. And then just make a little mark where you end up. It's all going to be covered anyway. Go to your next one. Push this in. Set your mark. Continue. A little bit hard here at the corner, but as long as you flatten it out, just do a little bit at a time, you shouldn't have any problem with it. Just continue that right across your corner seam, right up onto the front panel. Keeping the bottom edges straight on your pattern, and mark at the end.
Then just use a hot knife or scissors to cut it out. We did not show that.
We're going to use a soft acrylic binding. This is really the easiest to use around the edge. You can get some umbrella binding and use that if you wish, but this is real, hugs into it real well on the upswing and then around the bottom. It's a little bit different to handle, and you don't really want to run it through a feeder because it doesn't exactly hold itself. You need to help hold it. And it also wants to widen out on its own. So as we're sewing, we're going to be tensioning it just with a little tug. And you can almost see that there's a center line there. So we'll fold it over. Now, I do advise that on the ends, they will seem real wide. So if you just simply take it and tension that and do a couple of back stitches across it, it just gathers that end in and holds it together, and you can cut that wide end off and just fold that right inside, and it's going to hide, and that'll be the start of it with a finished edge on it. So we're going to start here. Flip this off just a little bit more. Okay, and see how wide it gets here like that, and if you just tension it, it goes right back. Okay, you want to fold the end in there, just kind of tension it a little bit and fold it over. And you can pinch that onto the end where you're going to start. And tension it a little bit, feed it up underneath the foot. And you want to just take your time with this. You will be very happy that you took a little bit of extra time with it, because you just want to go a little bit of a ways at a time. That way it's not going to move so much on you. So if you just do a few inches ahead of yourself, then you can see onto the back how it's going to be there. And just take a few back stitches here. Up a few more inches, pulling it, tensioning just a little bit, and it almost hugs right around it as you tension that. Then you can push it over and just hold it onto the fabric. And it is wise to keep your needle down, that way it's not going to slide one way or the other off of it as you're tensioning. And then you just pull it, and you can almost see where the center is, so then you just push down where the center is, go a few inches, and you see how that widened up right away there. So you don't want that, so then you just tension it a bit again, push down at the center, just move around all your scallops that way. You might have a couple places where it'll widen a little bit, but it really isn't that noticeable. And if you tension it, you can push in, and this stuff is soft enough that you can feel that it's up against your edge, so you don't have to worry about sewing it off of it. And then just go a few more inches again. And like I said, if you just keep inching your way around it, you'll be a lot happier with your finished product.
This acrylic soft binding is best sewn with a zigzag machine. It helps to catch the other side. If you don't have a zigzag, obviously you can use a straight stitch because we're doing it here. But a zigzag is a little trick.
And you want to try to keep a line in front of your foot, of course, just like before. Get my needle in there and then I'll tension.
It's too bad that you can't put this soft binding through one of Sailrite's binder attachments, but it does not work. It does not have enough body, so you have to do it by hand like this. You may ask, why are we using it? Why don't we just use the regular umbrella binding? The issue is that it doesn't go around curves as well. Obviously the binding has to shrink up, and the regular umbrella has a tendency to create little hard spots, while the soft binding does not. That's why we choose to use it for scallops. Everything else, use the regular binding. We've inserted the 1/2 inch EMT into the sleeve, that's the pipe, and are now using the thumb screws on the rod and rafter holder to hold it in place. From the inside of the awning, tie a knot with the leech line close to the building. Then we'll start lacing it through the grommets. The lacing technique is just basically going from one grommet to the other, obviously including that tie bar at the bottom side, and making it snug. When lacing, you'll obviously run into hardware like the slip-fit tie-down clamp. Simply go around it the way that you see best and continue lacing. There's no right or wrong way.
So you want to lace it kind of loose, and then once you get it all laced, come back and tighten it down.
In lieu of lacing, you could use the plastic cable ties. They work well too. Here at the corner, we obviously have the tie-down bars not going all the way to the corner, so we're coming up with a way to go around that corner and still make it nice and snug here. Those tie bars, if they went all the way to the corner, may abrade through the fabric. That's why we stopped short an inch or so. Once you've got it all laced, go back and just simply snug it all up. And here's the awning when she's complete. Again, it's installed on a board. Obviously, it would look better on a home or building. I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye.